And hello, movie lovers, and welcome to the show. With me, I have Will with me again, the host of Conversations about dot dot dot. Say hello to everyone, Will.
Hello, everybody.
And today we are actually going to be talking about the first four episodes of Miss Marvel. Now, I'll be honest with you, whenever it first premiered, I was not too crazy about it. It got me, to be honest with you, I needed to get used to the way of a young generation of how they watch TV.
Hmm.
Stuff like that. Because this is actually geared towards young preteens and stuff like that. But it's also very relatable and very reminiscent to what we would like to actually have if we were actually teenagers of this generation. Because all our lives we've been looking for a show that's nerdy like us, represents us as a nerd in the nerd culture, and we finally have it. But it's just 22 years later. But still, I like the fact that the main character actually represents us as nerds, and also too, she's also a fangirl, someone that's actually looking up to Captain Marvel. So
Hmm.
that's something that I really liked about the character, and of course, you're actually introducing us into her character, her religion, and also too, another thing I really liked was the fact that we're not in New York. We're actually in New Jersey instead, so it's a fresh take on that. But they're introducing us into two different worlds here. They're introducing us into the Pakistani India culture now in this last episode, and then in the very first episode, they're actually introducing us into how they shop, the ingredients that they actually put in their food and stuff like that. I love how authentic it actually is.
Hmm.
But what's your take on it?
One thing I love about the show is that it feels like the best way to describe it is it feels like the YouTube generation has truly been represented. I mean, if you look at the first thing, I mean, the fact that she's talking about doing a video series on Store Gamer and things like that, and then also dealing with 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 the whole Scott Lang podcast thing, we kind of get to find out how people of the MCU have kind of found out who the Avengers are and more about their pop culture status, them hitting pop culture status in the MCU, and then just very interconnected techie wise. I mean, you've got a guy that's basically a young Tony Stark in the making with her friend, and you've got her other friend who is, we find out later on is running for the position at the mosque, at their end and different things like that. So you see the cultural differences. You see Benny kind of really being adopted into family. So you don't see them kind of pushing him outside of it. He's very much integrated into the faith and things like that as far as different things, including the wedding party especially, which I loved because I love that idea of incorporating different people from different worlds into that party.
Same here
Really
as
kind of
well. That's something that I really liked about the fourth episode, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But one thing I like about the fourth episode is the fact that you actually have some history within the Pakistani India culture, and I also like no everybody's put this to be honest with you, they're actually frowned upon food. The amulet actually fits in with her culture. It tells the story of who she is. It's not
mhm.
there just for the sake of being there. Now, if it was just for the sake of being there, just to say, hey, look, we're going to change up her powers and not give a reason why. But this actually fits into the narrative of who her character is, and also gives representation of other people, other cultures, and stuff like that. And also, too, someone that is like the character that she's representing, which is Kamala Khan, and people can actually gravitate towards that now, just like they did with Black Panther, which is something that I really like. So now you have representation into this world of the Indian culture, and then you also have incorporating the Muslim beliefs. You also have that going on. This show is very good at doing
Mhm.
at planting the ground of what it wants to be.
Yeah, I think the
And
only
yeah,
bad thing about the show and all artists is that they dropped it right in the middle of Obi-Wan.
I was
So
gonna get to that too. Yeah.
so she really didn't get to kind of have her own space. And I'm not for sure. I'm guessing scheduling is just the way they played it, but it felt like it would have been better if right after Obi-Wan had come out, this had dropped, and then right after this dropped, then She-Hulk drops. Like it felt like there should have been a better bridge of time.
To be honest with you, I'd rather it be on this be on a Wednesday night and then have Obi-Wan on a Friday night. It made more sense to drop Obi-Wan on a Friday since it premiered on a Friday versus that. And I don't like the fact that this got lower views because of the fact that Obi-Wan overshadowed this series, because
Mhm.
it took me a little bit to get into it. I don't know if it was because of the fact I was too attached to Obi-Wan and too drawn in to his storyline to now where I can actually breathe a little bit away from Obi-Wan and just focus on Miss Marvel now.
Mhm.
But I appreciated this a lot more in the fourth episode than I did the first three episodes. This episode to me is just fantastic.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: I'm huge into mythology, especially dealing with Egyptian mythology, which is why I like Moon Knight. And now they're dealing with the India mythology, which is something that I really do appreciate with that too.
Yeah. And I mean, come on, man. Who would have ever thought we would have ever had a clandestine reference
Right?
in the comics? I mean, that comic was when she said some call us clandestine, I'm like, I vaguely remember the comic book name that. And sure enough, that's what the reference is to. It's this idea of this agency around the Marvel Universe, around the X-Men primarily. There was this group of Jinn who basically all existed and did different things. So that was an actual comic that's in the Marvel Universe.
Exactly, and that's something that I really liked was the fact that they covered the Jinn, because of course we know about genies and stuff like that, but I've always been interested in the jinns and stuff too. And now we actually have it played out in this, and now actually the ones who are. And I like how even if you don't know what jinns are, they have like a Wikipedia thing where where the character's friend is actually explaining what they are. And
Mm-hmm.
also too, Camilla's father's also explaining it to her friend for the very first time, like as if they're explaining it to us for the very first time. So that's
Yeah.
something I really like.
And
And then
that gave
also,
us the greatest callback also with the hostess pie. Because
definitely,
you remember the old school comics, you had the little hostess ads. Marvel used to run ads with hostess all the time and stuff. And so they'd be like the Hulk would be in the middle of the park and Abomination and somebody would be fighting him and he'd get a hostess pie and then all of a sudden he'd have the strength to whoop the crap out of everybody.
exactly. And another thing too is I like how they're showing us the tour. Basically, this is actually the best adaptation of what India actually looks like as well, because you're expecting dirt, you're expecting it to be dusty and everything else, and then you look at it and it's a beautiful country.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually, whenever Camilla is actually on that tour with her cousins, it feels like we're on that tour with her and
Mm-hmm.
exploring this and learning the stuff that's around her for the very first time, just like she is. So
Right.
I like that aspect to it. And then of course we get the dagger. Uh, the dagger thing was actually pretty cool to actually see. And then of course she's trying to learn where her grandmother actually came from too, as well with the train incident, especially whenever we actually see an image of the train coming out of the amulet. Whenever she pulls the fire alarm, and of course that fight scene in the kitchen and stuff like that. And then of course we wind up finding out that her grandmother was actually in a refugee who came in and was trying to escape um, whatever she was dealing with. So I like that.
Yeah, and it also has an interesting story about mothers and daughters. If you look at Kamala and her mom, and then you look at Kamala's mother and her mother, and like Kamala's mom, it feels like it really, the last episode really touched on that, is where she got away from a lot of it because of the fact that her mother was the same way Kamala was in a lot of ways, kind of the head in the sky, the dreamer. And she was just like, I don't want to be around that anymore. I want to be something stable. I want to be something concrete. And she just kind of walked away. But the relationship suffered because she walked away. And in the same way, that relationship can suffer with her and Kamala if she's not real careful, because she's trying to be like, well, I can help you, I can be there, but you got to let me know what's going on, type thing. And so Kamala's not sure she can. And so it's kind of that whole idea that I feel like by the end of this series, we're going to see those relationships healing between the moms and daughters.
Most definitely. I could also see the grandmother coming back to America with them, and after the healing has actually begun and open after they wind up opening up to each other a lot more. I think that even Camille, uh, I think you're going to actually see her character change and evolve by the end of the series, where she winds up letting her mother into her life more, because you see how much the mother is actually on her tail in the very first couple of episodes, where basically she's very hard on her and she only wants what's best for her, but at the
Mm-hmm.
same time it's like you at that age, you have your own dreams, you have your own ambitions that you want to go after, and sometimes your parents not might be the best supportive person out there, but you
Hmm.
know at the end of the day, that's still your parents no matter what. But it's just sad to actually see how much emotional damage that she's doing on her, to where she has an anxiety of freezing up when it comes down to opening up to her own mother because she can't open up to her.
Yeah.
So you have that part being played in here, which is also why she's knocked out during Avengers Con.
Hmm. Which, by the way, they need to do Avengers Con at one of the Disney World things. Like they need to do that on a rotational basis, to where they're just doing different Avengers Cons at different Disney locations, and you can pick up different swag at each one. That's quote unofficial, but yet it's Disney controlling the narrative. So of course, they can tell other stories as they want to tell. For example, in those narratives, like the origin of the origin of Starboy instead of Star Lord, or different things like that. I just find it interesting how they did that.
Same here as well, because I think that they can actually benefit off of having the Avengers Con being played into it, and also having that over at Disney World and stuff like that. Can you imagine just each day has like a different theme and
Hmm.
celebrating different heroes? That would be awesome to actually see in a live adaptation into our world.
Hmm.
But then of course, she also doesn't fit in with her school. She's also an alien trying to fit in, basically because of the fact that she's different. Not only is she different with the geek culture, but she's also from a foreign country, which also makes it that much harder to actually fit in into this world as well, which sucks. And then, the only friend that she has is like a Peter Parker kind of person that actually accepts her for who she is. And I like how they play it off. They bounce off each other very well. I thought that
Hmm.
the friendship between her and that character is
Her and
fantastic.
Bruno.
Yeah, her and Bruno is great.
And
Um,
then yeah, and then of course even her and Nakia, which that's gonna play interesting because of the fact that Nakia kind of had an issue with Nightlight, as they're calling her now. Like they haven't officially given her the Miss Marvel title yet. But I don't feel like anybody there in the show is going to be the one to give her that title. I feel like that might be something that she gets at the end of the show somehow or
I,
another.
I think so too. I think it's going to be something that's earned rather than something that's given. And I think that she's actually, and matter of fact, Nightlight is actually a perfect way of actually saying, "Hey, look, this character's a light uh, into Camilla's family and stuff like that too, and helping her and guiding her
Well, and
too." So
also that
that's
little
something.
boy, yeah, and also that little boy she saved.
Yeah,
And then you think about what the priest told her, when she was just dealing with it, and she's like, well, is Nightlight causing more harm than good? And he's all like, well, I don't think that little boy would have felt that way. And then she's like, well, I just think she wants to do good, and she just wants to be good. And he tells her, which is something straight out of the comic, Miss Marvel comics, Kamala, good is not something that
you're
you
born
are
with.
you are.
Or
It's something that you do.
exactly. And I like how, to be honest with you, it kind of reminds me of Man of Steel a little bit, where she's trying to find herself and trying to find who she is, and questioning her own inabilities and stuff like that. Yeah, some things went awry whenever you had the whole suicide jump, and then you also had the other thing that happened as well whenever you look at the Avengers Con stuff. But underneath the surface and everything, she's trying to learn her abilities, trying to learn her powers, and trying to discover, is this power too much for me, or is it not enough for me? Am I doing the right thing here? And I like that quote though, that he winds up saying, is something is not something that you do. You know what I'm saying? I like how he did that. So I like that quote. But another thing that I can say is, even whenever you have Karan, who winds up helping her and trying to save her at the party, because he knows that his family's only looking at it from one perspective of trying to get back home, and if they come back home, the world will explode, basically.
Hmm.
So, and this is me speculating. We've been dealing with all these gods and everything recently. When you look at Eternals, when you look at it, all that stuff, I wouldn't be surprised that we're gonna probably be dealing with gods by the time Kevin Feige winds up announcing the fact that we're gonna be face to face with another god.
I can see that, but I also see, especially with the blue skinned hand that we got the bangle off of, I see more of we're headed towards Secret Invasion because we're
Hmm,
dealing with a lot
right,
of Kree and Skrull stuff. And so the fact that the idea that this is the MCU version of the Nega bands, where and it's important to state bands because there's a band missing. And also the fact that they gave us the thing when they talked about finding the initial band, it was surrounded by the 10 rings. So the 10 ring Wing Wu, I believe it's Wing Wu from Shang-Chi, would have known about that location. So then the question is, where is the other bangle ultimately? And does she perhaps get the other bangle by the end of the first this series, assuming it's a limited series, assuming we don't end up with a season 2 or 4?
right. And how many episodes do we get for this season, anyways?
We got 6, which means we've got 4 down. We got 2 more to go.
And that's going to be hard to wrap up. We saw how hard it was for Obi-Wan to wrap up with 6 episodes.
Yeah, I'm really
So
beginning to wish that Disney Plus would go to a different model. I don't know that I necessarily need to have them do a Netflix where they're doing 13 or 14 episodes, but it would be nice to do like a 10 episode block because it feels like sometimes there's parts of the stories that are rushed to hit that deadline, as opposed to can we spread this out a little bit further, you know, and like I
feel you
said,
on that.
it may have to do with scheduling, but I just feel like they've got a lot of rush stories because of stuff. I feel like Obi-Wan, there's a lot more in Obi-Wan they could have done had they had 2 more episodes even.
Exactly. That's actually how I feel about some of these Disney Plus shows. I feel like that they could actually do a better job at closing. They're great at opening, but as for closings go, that's where their struggle is at. Especially
Mm-hmm.
with an unknown character like Kamala Khan and everything too. You need to actually establish her to people that don't know her character that well. Like me, I don't know her character that well
Yeah,
or anything. So I feel like having 10 episodes for a character that's an unknown, we need to have more one-on-one time with her before we go on in and put her into an MCU film.
yeah. Which of course we know she's going to be in the Marvels with Carol Danvers
Uh,
and Monica Rambeau. So we know that she's going to be in that next film. Of course, the other reason I feel like there's more there could do more episodes is because once she does get to the end goal, there should be episodes where we start to see her maybe working with Carol and how she works with Carol, and maybe they eventually beat Monica, and then we kind of set up the Marvels from the show to where again, and I know Kevin Feige has always talked about the idea that I don't want to make these shows where people have had to have watched them, but I feel like that's a big problem uh, with, for example, Multiverse of Madness. When you go from Endgame to Multiverse of Madness, if you've never watched WandaVision, there's a whole lot there that they've got to try to
mhm.
explain in that movie because if you're making it for an audience that didn't see the show in between, you know what I
Right.
mean?
And that's what I told my brother-in-law though too. If you don't have someone like me who's actually saw all the Marvel TV shows, you're going to be lost
Mm-hmm.
and everything. And he hasn't seen one single Marvel show, so he doesn't know how all this stuff is actually linked up. So basically, I gave him like a rough draft of how everything's linked up after Endgame, so that way he goes in there being prepared whenever he saw if he's going to go see Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Mm-hmm.
Because it can be too convoluted. It can also be where if you're not familiar with anything that's going on within WandaVision or anything like that and watching the Disney Plus shows, it's going to be feeling like a little bit of comic book fatigue for some people as well. And
Exactly.
And I feel like Feige needs to do a better job of at least putting some kind of flashbacks in there to show the continuity between what happened after each thing. So that way we don't have to play catch up in the movie theater talking while the movie is going and trying to catch somebody up on events.
Yeah. Well, it's like I had to explain to my nephew about when we saw the trailer for Multiverse of Madness. And initially, of course, we saw the Dark Strange. And so I was thinking it could be this uh,
What if?
Doctor Strange from What If, but then also seeing Captain Carter in the trailer, he was like, "Who's that with the shield? That doesn't look like Captain America." I was like, "No, that's Captain Carter from What If." And he's like, "What if?" It's like, "Oh, I need to watch that." I said, "Yeah, it'd be a good idea to watch it between now and then." So that way you kind of get an idea of who that is, because What If played with the idea of if Sharon Carter had received the super soldier serum instead of Steve Rogers. He's like, oh, okay, well then yeah. So of course he watched it. So then by the time we got to Multiverse of Madness and watched that, he goes, oh, okay, now this makes sense who that is.
Right. So now we have some continuity between everything.
Mm-hmm.
So going into the rest of this season and stuff like that, as far as the show goes, I'm not. At first, I had to get used to the neon flashing signs whenever they're texting back and forth between Bruno and Chimera. I thought that was actually pretty cool. It kind of reminded me of Baby Driver, where basically you wind up at the very beginning of Baby Driver, you wind up seeing lyrics to the song being played throughout the streets.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was actually pretty cool and a new way of actually showing text messages versus doing it the old-fashioned way. So I definitely liked that. Right. It was just getting used to the style and the narration of the story itself. That was the problem for me. And like I said, I think it was just the fact that I was watching Obi-Wan and I was just so tied up with Obi-Wan that I couldn't enjoy it for what it is. So I binge watched all 4 episodes. Mm-hmm. And it actually makes more sense by doing that, going into it and watching it from episode 1 all the way to 4, because you can see that the character actually evolved more in doing it that way. But, you know, I liked also, too, of the fact that you have the grandmother and the daughter opening up to each other, and then she's sitting there and you know, it's basically you're dealing with an older version of what Chimera, you know, what she's going through with her mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even to the point where she respects her mom enough to not go into super detail, because she even says, you know, your mom gets really sketchy about this. You know, so I really don't want to bring it up to you. You know, whenever on the phone with each other the first time, and then of course she calls her back. It's like, you got to come here. You got to come here. Did you see the train? You know, and she's just like, yeah, I saw the train. How do you know? Did you see? I saw it too. And so it's just like there's something that connects them in that regard to that power when that occurred. And so then for them to end up going, which I thought was really interesting too, because they're kind of even on the plane going, you know, the mom's kind of like, why are you sleeping with that thing? You know, that's not a, you know, and so it's like the mom is trying to get her to quote grow up. And even it's funny because I think, what is the name of the YouTube channel that she has? It's something like Wing Sloth or something, Sloth Baby.
Yeah, Sloth Baby.
And so she has a little sloth stuffed animal. I was like, man, her merch, if she ever goes out to some of these cons, her merch table is going to be awesome. I can just imagine about the Sloth Baby type merchandise out there.
But yeah, Sloth Baby.
Yeah, that'd be pretty awesome. So as far as that goes as well, though, getting to see another example of time travel in the MCU, because now when the dagger stabs the gauntlet there, and then she jumps back in time to when the train was originally coming. You know, so I'm sure she's going to get a real good family history of what happened. She's going to actually get to see it.
I think so too. I'm thinking that she's going to get a play-by-play of what her grandmother was like on the train, the character of who her grandmother is, and then after that, finding her own self and her own way with the amulet, and then making those powers expand even more to become even stronger, to the point where she can destroy those gens that she needs to destroy in some kind of capacity. So I'm thinking that after she winds up finding out who she is and discovering how she is, that power is just going to overpower her to the point where she winds up becoming strong. Now, my question is, over or under, do you think that we actually get to see her go out in space and you see Carol Danvers, and you also get to see Samuel L. Jackson and Rambeau?
I think the moment at the end of episode 6, and I think it will be an after credit scene, is that I think she's out working with Bruno or something like that. Because of course, another fun thing about Bruno too is that he's got this opportunity to go off to Caltech, and so it's gonna be real interesting how they play that. But what's gonna be funny is she may be working on stuff or whatever. Then Carol just kind of shows up, and she says something to the effect of, you know, something similar to what Nick Fury said. You're involved in a world that's a lot bigger than you, or something like that. And she had been investigating, looking for the bands or whatever, but now apparently she found out that the band's had a host. And so then it's like, you know, that's kind of how they do the whole her and Bruno thing. Because then it's like, I think she ends up in space with Nick Fury, with Monica, and with Carol. And that's how we start the Marvels.
I think so too. I think that's how we actually started off because I was actually thinking this through my mind and everything too as I'm seeing it. I'm like, I bet at the end of the sixth episode or whatever, I think that we're gonna wind up seeing her in space after this.
Hmm.
And I think that's actually a perfect way of actually ending that series and then focusing on building your phase
Yeah.
because everybody forgets that before Marvel didn't have a cohesive landmark that they were trying to land. They were setting everything up. Everybody had individual films, and then before you know it, we actually had what we had with the very first Avengers movie. And this is exactly what we're doing. We're doing play by play of individual stuff right now. When they have WandaVision, which is like an individual movie, you have Loki, which is an individual movie. You also have the regular cinematic stuff as
Falcon
well.
and Winter Soldier, of
Yep,
course, and Miss Marvel, and then She Hulk, and other projects that they've got down the line that they're going to be doing.
right. But all in all, I'm excited to actually see what we have for the next two episodes as far as that goes. But is there anything else that you want to say as far as the show goes?
I think one of the most important factors, not only in representing the culture, which is really important too, but it also sets up stuff for other stuff. For example, the clandestines that are caught are put in the Supermax prison, which we
Oh
know for a
yeah, I
fact the
forgot about that.
Supermax prison is going to be in the She-Hulk series because that's what she's going to end up getting put through. And then also, I love the idea that the episode titles give some stuff away. Like, for example, the last episode was, of course, Seeing Red, where we got the appearance of the Red Daggers.
Right.
And of course, that's a character that's actually in the Miss Marvel books as well. But it's just one character, whereas in the MCU, they've kind of turned it into a group of people, which I thought was interesting too. And so I know just a little bit about Miss Marvel from the comics, but I'm glad they're taking a very unique approach and putting her in this. I'm really interested to see where they go from here. And another thing too that's funny, her power is based on light. Apparently, when she was at Avengers Con, of course, put the bangle on, and then she flips back through, sees the alternative world around her, and then kind of comes back into our world. And then she's surrounded by all the lights, and all the lights are going off, and then all of a sudden she creates the light construct for the first time. Can you imagine what's going to happen when she truly gets a handle on her powers and she's around Carol and Photon?
Oof. We're gonna see people light up like a Christmas tree, especially with Carol Danvers,
Yeah.
and she's gonna be just as strong as Carol is, if not stronger than Carol.
And then you figure that Photon's going to be able to understand what's going on and be able to help her with stuff too. Because there again, the thing about Photon is she can understand different energy levels and different energy waves of almost every type known to man. I mean, the fact she was able to literally break down Wanda's chaos energy to the point where in WandaVision, she actually is able to stop herself from being brought down using the same energy. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they bring them together.
Most
So
definitely, man. But yeah, I think that maybe next Wednesday we can actually do this again and do the next two episodes together and break it
well,
down.
well, of course, the next two. Well, of course, we got episode 4 this week. So, of course, next week will be
Right,
episode 5, and then the following week will be episode 6. So they're not doing
right,
the 2 episodes together. So, I mean, we could definitely
right,
break down the
right.
next episode.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead and do individual episodes after this. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm definitely excited for that. So that's gonna be it as far as the show goes and everything. But Will, where can everybody reach you at if they want to go ahead and listen to your podcast? Because your podcast is doing fantastic, by the way.
I appreciate that. So, the simplest way to go about is to go and it's on Spotify. It's anywhere you can look. Google Podcasts, anywhere your podcasts are available. It's just called Conversations About dot dot dot. I'd recommend putting hyphens in there, and then that way you can find that, and then that way you can go there and check that out. And so that's the best place I would recommend to go and find the podcast. And we can always make sure you have links and stuff to drop in the ID information and stuff like that as well.
And guys, we just dropped our trailer reaction for Hocus Pocus 2. Alex and I both did for both of our channels. So go on ahead, check out the trailer reaction for Hocus Pocus 2. We also did a short review of Hotel Transformania, which is a non-spoiler review. Check that out on the channel as well. And that's everything that you guys can do for this for right now for our Movie Loves Unite. So always until next time, guys, don't forget to smash that like button, the comment button, and subscribe button. And